We all love to point at other people and say, oh, they're so selfish. Oh, they're so self-centered. I certainly love to do this, and I have it done to me because all of us are, to a point, selfish and self-centered, self-involved and self-absorbed, right? That is the nature of humans. However, of course, when someone is so self-centered that they are not regulated by empathy, that's when they're in narcissism. But when they are so self-centered that they are coding it in self-sacrifice and martyr and, oh, I give so much, and that kind of codependent martyr thing, well, that is another form of more covert selfishness. And we don't talk about that because it's pretty hard to see, but a good example is like parents kind of get into this idea that because they chose to have a kid, they suddenly, and because they're giving to that kid and raising it, they tend to start to say that everyone else is selfish who doesn't have kids. And I agree with this. I tend to think, well, yeah, it's true. Like, I am just worried about myself. I'm not worried about kids, so I'm not as selfless as these people who are raising kids. I'll often subscribe to that. But there's actually a huge selfishness in this kind of, well, I'm a self-sacrificing parent kind of character that we don't talk about. And that's that there is an underlying expectation of that parent that that kid will provide, that will be the person that will reflect well on the parent. Whether that, or oftentimes parents have a very self-centered need for their kid to validate them, to validate their identity, to be a mini them, to be the little mini you. And all of those things are incredibly self-centered because this is a person that is going to have their own identity, their own wants and motivations and interests. And oftentimes they're going to not validate that parent's view of reality and view of what they like. And so this idea that parents are just by the fact that they're parents inherently selfless is something that I notice the most selfish of people really rely on. They really rely on being seen as selfless and self-sacrificing. But that leads to them having a lot of resentment because if their kid does not uphold their unconscious hopes, like if that kid doesn't reflect what they ideally want, then that kid, or if that kid invalidates that parent just in terms of even a personality that's different, then that parent can have a huge amount of hate that they then have to pretend they don't have for the kid. And so this kind of selfish quality, we got to realize we don't have to have it be such a scarlet letter. I think first of all, we got to own our own selfishness and say, yeah, I have these kind of self-centered desires. Like I'm hoping that my kid will like this same hobby that I do so we can share it. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, yes, it's selfish, but it's also very human. It makes sense. It's not crazy. And also it's just by pointing out and concentrating on the selfishness of others, you're just judging others to avoid your own shame. So just instead of that, kind of see yourself in people and say, they're selfish, I'm selfish. I just may have found a better cloak about it. I may have found a better little coping mechanism, but we're all selfish, but we all have propensity to be empathic too. And one thing that does bring out the empathy is having your own kids, because you're going to care about them way more often than just some random strangers, because you did create those kids. But that doesn't mean they're under any obligation to be your clone and to reflect back at you that you are a good person, that you are smart, beautiful, good, any type of thing that you want to be validated. That kid it may not reflect that. They may be just as much a source of growth for you as a parent as you are them. Like a parent is, yes, they're an authority in helping the kid grow up, but it doesn't mean that the parent should be completely closed off to the influence that kid could have. That kid could have a lot of influence that could actually help the parent continue to grow, expand, evolve, and be their best self. So by the parent sticking with the role of thinking, I have nothing left to learn, this kid better do things exactly how I do it and see things how I see it and validate my identity. If they're in that, they're actually very rigid and resistant to the potential of learning from that kid and expanding and being an even better version of yourself from that kid. Like that kid is learning from you, but also you can be learning just as much. And I think it's something important to think about with these kind of default assumptions with selfishness and with childhood and raising kids, that self-sacrifice is the opposite of selfishness, when really they're actually linked.